The myth that keeps you poor. There is a story this world has been telling itself for centuries, a story so old, so deeply embedded into the architecture of human culture, that most people have never once stopped to question whether it is actually true. You know this story. You were born into it. It goes like this: work hard, suffer enough, sacrifice long enough, and eventually abundance will find you. Grind until your body breaks, delay pleasure until your youth is spent, trade your hours for dollars until there are no more hours left, and at the end of that long, exhausting road, you will have earned your place among the comfortable. From the earliest days of childhood, from classrooms in Singapore to schoolyards in São Paulo, from kitchen table conversations in Lagos to bedtime stories in Oslo, the same fundamental message was delivered to every generation. Your worth is measured in your effort. Your reward is equal to your sacrifice. Rest is weakness. Ambition is everything. Pain is the price of success. This belief didn't emerge from wisdom. It emerged from necessity. When the industrial age rewired civilization, factory owners needed obedient, tireless workers. They needed human beings who would clock in before dawn and clock out long after dark, without asking too many inconvenient questions about why the fruits of their labor were flowing so consistently upward. And so, a mythology was built. The mythology of noble suffering, the gospel of the grind, the sacred altar of hard work. Chimneys belched smoke into gray skies across every continent. Men and women poured the best years of their lives into machines, into fields, into production lines, because they had been told that this was the path, that endurance was virtue, that exhaustion was evidence of character. But here is the quiet, dangerous truth that almost no one dared to speak aloud. Money has never, not once in all of recorded history, come solely from hard work. Look honestly at the world around you. If physical effort were the true engine of wealth, the richest human beings on earth would be construction workers in Mumbai, domestic workers in Manila, farmhands in rural Brazil, nurses pulling triple shifts in underfunded hospitals across the developing world. These are among the hardest working people alive. They pour everything they have into their labor, day after day, year after year. And yet, statistically, they remain among the most financially vulnerable. Meanwhile, men and women who appear to exert a fraction of that physical effort, who sometimes seem to operate almost effortlessly, accumulate fortunes that defy ordinary comprehension. Why? This question is not rhetorical. It is the most important question you can ask if you want your financial life to fundamentally change. And the answer, uncomfortable as it may be, is this: wealth is not a physical phenomenon. It is a mental one. Roughly a century ago, a quiet, deeply thoughtful man named Wallace D. Wattles sat down and wrote a book that the academic establishment largely ignored, that mainstream economists dismissed, and that millions of ordinary people, from struggling artists to self-made entrepreneurs on every inhabited continent, quietly credited with transforming their lives. His central argument was so simple it seemed almost offensive, so obvious it seemed almost naive. Men do not get rich by doing certain things. They get rich by doing things in a certain way. Read that again slowly. He did not say, work harder. He did not say, work smarter. He said, in a certain way. A way that has nothing to do with the number of hours logged, the physical strain endured, or the impressive list of credentials accumulated. That certain way is what we are going to explore together. It is a way of thinking, a way of being, a way of moving through the world that aligns you with the invisible architecture of abundance, rather than constantly colliding with it. For generations, humanity has been hypnotized by what we might call the labor illusion. We dressed it in respectable language, productivity, discipline, hustle culture, and never once looked closely enough to see the tragedy underneath. The tragedy is this: we were taught that value flows from the outside in, that money, security, and prosperity must be forcibly extracted from the external world through sheer willpower, relentless effort, and competitive survival. But look carefully at the people you know. Think honestly about those in your own life who seem to move through the world with an almost effortless grace, the ones for whom opportunities seem to materialize at convenient moments, the ones whose businesses grow while others, with equal apparent effort, stagnate, the ones who seem to be carried by some invisible current while everyone else is paddling furiously upstream. Is it luck? Is it privilege? Is it unfair? Or is something else entirely happening beneath the surface? Wattles pointed to what physics today might call a unified field, what ancient traditions called the Tao, or prana, or the divine matrix, a thinking, responsive, intelligent substance that fills all space between atoms and galaxies. He called it thinking substance, and he described it not as a mystical fairy tale, but as a practical, observable reality, an intelligent field that responds to human thought in the same reliable, predictable way that soil responds to seeds. Plant a seed of anxiety, of scarcity, of desperate grasping, and the field cultivates more anxiety, more scarcity, more frustration. Plant a seed of clarity, of abundance consciousness, of sincere and settled expectation, and the field cultivates circumstances, connections, and resources that match that frequency. The universe contains thinking substance, from which all things are made, and which, in its original state, permeates, penetrates, and fills the interspaces of the universe. A thought in this substance produces the thing that is imaged by the thought. This is not the language of magic. It is the language of mechanics. It is describing a system, a law, as consistent and reliable as gravity. You don't have to believe in gravity for it to operate. You don't have to understand the precise physics of magnetic fields for a compass to point north. And you don't have to fully comprehend this law for it to be shaping your financial reality right now, whether you are aware of it or not. The real question is, are you working with this law or unknowingly against it? Most people are working against it with tremendous, exhausting effort. They are pushing against the current of their own deepest beliefs. They work harder and harder, believing that if they just endure a little longer, push a little further, sacrifice a little more, the wall will eventually crack. And sometimes it does, but not because of the suffering, despite it. When things finally shift for people who have been grinding endlessly, it is almost always because something inside them shifted first. They relaxed. They let go of some desperate grip. They stopped fighting and, almost accidentally, allowed. In that brief window of surrender, the law had room to work. You have almost certainly experienced this yourself. Think of a moment when you stopped trying so hard, when you released a problem, walked away from an outcome you had been white-knuckling, and suddenly the answer arrived. Suddenly, the door opened. Suddenly, the right person appeared. That wasn't coincidence. That was you, however briefly and accidentally, stepping into alignment. This entire journey we are embarking on together is about making that alignment intentional. Not occasional and accidental, but consistent and deliberate. It is about learning to live from the inside out rather than the outside in. To understand that your financial life is not something that happens to you, but something that is generated by you from the invisible studio of your own consciousness. The world will keep telling you the old story. It will keep insisting that struggle is the price of success, that exhaustion is evidence of seriousness, that rest is laziness, and that the universe is indifferent to your inner life. You are free to keep believing that story. Billions of people do, and they remain, decade after decade, exactly where they are. Or you can begin today to entertain a different possibility, a possibility that has been quietly validated by every great mystic, every deep philosopher, every genuinely transformative teacher across all of human history, now increasingly echoed by quantum physicists who talk about observer effects, coherent fields, and the participatory universe. The possibility is this: your outer world is a faithful, reliable, almost mechanical reflection of your inner world. And if you want to change what you are experiencing financially, truly, fundamentally, not just temporarily, you must begin with the one thing that actually controls everything else: your consciousness. Not your calendar, not your resume, not your network or your net worth or your number of social media followers. Your consciousness, the quality of your awareness, the frequency of your dominant inner state. We are just beginning. The terrain ahead is extraordinary. But first, we need to dismantle the one belief that is doing more damage to your financial life than any external circumstance ever could. The belief that you need to fight for abundance, that wealth must be seized, competed for, or painfully earned, rather than cultivated from within and gracefully received. That dismantling begins now, and it starts with an honest look at what effort has actually cost you and what it has genuinely returned. Here is what Wattles saw so clearly at the height of the Industrial Revolution, surrounded by men working themselves to physical ruin. The people who were accumulating the most were not the ones suffering the most. They were the ones who had, consciously or not, tapped into a different operating system. They moved differently. They spoke differently. They made decisions differently. Not from fear, but from something quieter and far more powerful, a settled inner knowing that abundance was their natural inheritance, not a prize to be violently seized. That knowing is not reserved for the privileged few. It is not genetically encoded into certain bloodlines. It is not the exclusive property of people born in wealthy nations or fortunate circumstances. It is available, right now, to every human being willing to do the one kind of work that the hustle culture never talks about: inner work, consciousness work, the disciplined, patient, and ultimately liberating work of aligning your mind with the truth of abundance. By the time this journey is complete, you will understand exactly what that means, and more importantly, you will know precisely how to do it: the labor. Illusion. Why effort alone will never be enough. Before the sun rises over the harbor in Cape Town, a woman named Fatima is already on her feet. The ocean air is cold and sharp. Her hands are rough from years of work she cannot afford to stop doing. She boards a crowded train before the city wakes, arrives at the first of her 2 jobs before her employer unlocks the door, and does not sit down, truly sit down, until nearly midnight. By every conventional measure, Fatima is doing everything right. She is disciplined. She is consistent. She is present and reliable and hard-working to a degree that puts most people to shame. And yet financial stability remains, for her, a horizon that never seems to get closer. The months blur together. The numbers stay roughly the same. The exhaustion deepens. Now consider a man named David. He runs a digital agency from a modest co-working space in Nairobi. He does not work anywhere near Fatima's hours. He takes weekends deliberately, sleeps 8 hours, exercises regularly, and describes his relationship with work as, and he uses this word without embarrassment, enjoyable. His income in a single quarter exceeds what Fatima earns in 3 years. This disparity is not just economically uncomfortable, it is philosophically destabilizing. If the world's operating mythology is correct, if effort and reward are genuinely proportional, then this picture makes no moral sense. It offends our deeply conditioned idea of fairness. But Wattles was not concerned with fairness as the labor mythology defined it. He was concerned with truth, and the truth, he observed, with remarkable consistency across the economic landscape of his era, was this: the people accumulating the most financial abundance were almost never the most physically laborious. They were the most mentally aligned. There is a specific kind of suffering that the hustle culture glorifies and that Wattles identified as one of the primary mechanisms, keeping people financially stuck. He called it working from the competitive plane. And it is not about how hard you work. It is about the inner atmosphere from which your work emerges. When you work from anxiety, when every action is driven by the fear of falling behind, of losing, of not being enough, of running out, you generate what might be called spiritual friction. Your effort becomes a kind of energetic static. You are broadcasting, through every tense muscle and every worried thought, a signal that says, "I am fighting because I do not have enough." And the field of intelligent substance that Wattles described, the same field that quantum physicists increasingly suggest is the ground state of all observable reality, cannot distinguish between what you want and what you fear. It simply amplifies the frequency you are predominantly occupying. Imagine a musician who approaches the stage terrified of playing the wrong note. Every finger movement is tight with anxiety, every breath shallow with dread. The music that emerges, even if technically correct, will be lifeless. It will lack the quality that moves people, that creates a genuine experience, that generates real value in the world. Now imagine the same musician approaching the same stage from a place of deep inner ease, from joy, from mastery, from genuine creative excitement. The notes may be identical, but the music is transformed. The audience feels something different. The effect is different. Your work operates by exactly the same law. When you act from fear, you produce technically correct outputs with spiritually hollow results. You send emails that don't convert. You attend meetings that don't lead anywhere. You launch projects that somehow never gain traction despite massive effort. And you exhaust yourself in the process, unable to understand why more effort is not producing more results. When you act from alignment, from a settled inner knowing that abundance is your natural state, that you are a channel for something larger than your personal survival, the same actions carry a different charge. The same email becomes compelling. The same meeting becomes generative. The same project seems to attract the right people, the right timing, the right circumstances almost automatically. This is what Wattles meant by doing things in a certain way, not a secret technique, not a special strategy, a certain quality of inner atmosphere from which all action flows. The labor illusion has a particularly dangerous side effect in the modern world. What we now call hustle culture, the social celebration of overwork, burnout, and relentless grinding, has turned exhaustion itself into a status symbol. Sleep deprivation is marketed as commitment. Chronic stress is reframed as passion. The person who works 80 hours a week and cannot remember the last time they felt genuinely rested is held up as a model of ambition. But here is the physics of it. Stress and urgency broadcast scarcity. They are, at their energetic core, a continuous signal that says there is not enough time, not enough money, not enough opportunity. The person running at that frequency is, regardless of how loudly they talk about success, continuously sending the message of lack into the field, and the field responds accordingly, with more circumstances requiring urgency, more problems demanding emergency response, more evidence that yes, indeed, there is never quite enough. Wattles was unusually direct about this. He wrote that the belief in poverty as the reward for suffering in wealth as the prize for pain, represents a fundamental misunderstanding of the creative process. Wealth, he insisted, is the result of right thinking and right action, action that emerges from alignment, not from desperation. Think back across your own life and find the evidence. Think of the times you pushed hardest, white-knuckled a goal, forced an outcome, refused to sleep until a project was finished. Remember the quality of what emerged, the relationship that required constant maintenance and manufactured drama, the business deal that you pressured across the finish line and that immediately began to unravel, the job you fought your way into that never felt like yours. Forced results tend to be brittle results. They require continuous, effortful maintenance. They do not grow organically. They do not generate the effortless momentum that genuine alignment produces. Now remember the opposite experiences, the project that seemed to assemble itself, where the right people showed up at the right moments, where obstacles dissolved before you reached them. The conversation that turned unexpectedly into an opportunity you hadn't even been looking for. The solution that arrived in the shower in the middle of the night when you had finally stopped straining for it. Those experiences were not lucky accidents. They were moments of alignment. The antidote to the labor, illusion is not laziness. Wattles never for a moment suggested that action is irrelevant. Action is essential. But action must emerge from a different source, not from fear of loss, but from confidence in supply. Not from the desperate energy of someone scrambling to survive, but from the settled energy of someone who knows they are a conduit for something inexhaustible. There is a useful image here. Think of a river. When a river runs freely, when it is unobstructed, when its banks are clear, when nothing is damming its natural movement. Water flows with tremendous power and grace. It does not strain, it does not doubt, it does not second-guess its direction. It simply follows the law of its own nature and moves toward the sea with absolute inevitability. You are the riverbed. Abundance is the water. Your job is not to generate the water through sheer exertion. Your job is to clear the riverbed, to remove the boulders of fear, the log jams of scarcity thinking, the narrow channels of desperate striving, so that what is already flowing abundantly through the universe can flow freely and consistently through you. This is the paradigm shift at the heart of everything that follows. Not less effort, but different effort. Not passive waiting, but active alignment. Not hustling harder, but being more fully, more authentically, more consistently yourself, as a clear channel for the intelligence and abundance that are trying, right now, to move through you. The woman working 2 jobs and living in financial anxiety is not failing because she doesn't try hard enough. She is experiencing the mechanical reflection of an inner atmosphere saturated with scarcity. She is, without knowing it, blocking the very flow she is desperately trying to create through effort alone. And the moment she understands this, genuinely, viscerally, not just intellectually, everything becomes possible. Because the one thing in the entire universe over which she has complete sovereign authority is her own consciousness, and her consciousness, Wattles tells us, is the one thing that actually determines her financial experience. So let us build that consciousness. Let us begin, deliberately and systematically, to shift the inner atmosphere from which your entire life emerges. Let us replace the labor illusion with something incomparably more powerful, the creative law. You are not put on this earth to endure. You are put on this earth to create, to expand, to contribute, to express the full measure of what you contain. And in that expression, in that joyful, purposeful, aligned creation, abundance does not need to be fought for. It simply follows. Like a shadow follows a body. Like music follows a tuned instrument. Like light follows the sun. Creative mind versus competitive mind. the choice that determines everything. In every human being walking this earth right now, there is a fork in the road. Most people are not aware it exists. Most people have never been shown the signpost. But every single financial outcome, every career trajectory, every pattern of abundance or scarcity in a human life can be traced back to which road that person is, consciously or unconsciously, traveling. The first road leads through a landscape of scarcity. It is defined by competition, the deep belief that the world contains a finite supply of good things, that what someone else gets somehow diminishes what is available to you, that life is fundamentally a zero-sum game where the winners must, by definition, be creating losers. This is the competitive mind. The second road leads through a different landscape entirely. It is defined by creation, the understanding that the universe is not a fixed pie to be divided, but an infinitely generative field from which entirely new value can be continuously called into existence. This is the creative mind. Wattles, with the clinical clarity of a diagnostician, identified the competitive mind state as the single greatest tragedy of modern economic life. He watched it in his era. The industrial barons clawing at each other for market dominance, the workers competing desperately for the limited positions available, everyone in a permanent state of zero-sum vigilance. And he saw what that state of vigilance cost. Not just peace of mind, but actual, measurable, mechanical disconnection from the intelligent field that produces abundance. Because here is the thing about the competitive mind. It cannot help broadcasting the signal of lack. When you believe that resources are finite, when you experience another person's success as a potential threat to your own, when you operate from the assumption that the universe is stingy and you must fight for every crumb, you are continuously transmitting a scarcity frequency into the very field that is trying to deliver abundance to you. And the field, being absolutely literal in its response, delivers more scarcity. This is not philosophical. This is not metaphorical. This is, as far as we can determine from both ancient wisdom and modern physics, the actual operating mechanics of the universe. Think about what happens in your body when you feel genuinely competitive. Not the healthy motivation of personal challenge, but the anxious surveillance state vigilance of someone who believes the game is rigged and the resources are limited. There is a tightening in the chest. The jaw clenches. The breath becomes shallow. The muscles prepare for a fight that may never come, but that the nervous system is convinced is always imminent. This is the biological signature of scarcity consciousness. And in this state, which so many people inhabit almost continuously, creativity collapses, generosity becomes impossible. Genuine contribution, the kind that actually generates sustainable wealth, is replaced by self-protective hoarding. The competitive mind thinks, how do I take more of what is already out there? The creative mind thinks, what can I bring into existence that has never existed before? These two questions generate completely different lives. Let us be honest with ourselves for a moment. When was the last time you felt a sharp, uncomfortable pang of something you might have called jealousy when you heard about someone else's success? When a colleague got the promotion, when a friend's business took off, when someone in your industry achieved a level of recognition you had been quietly wanting for yourself? What did you feel? If that pang was real, and for most people it is, at least occasionally, it carried a message. The message was, there is a limited amount of success available, and they just got some of yours. But here is the truth that competitive thinking hides from you. There is no such thing as your piece of success being taken by someone else. Success is not a physical resource that can be depleted. The universe does not have a success quota. The creative field from which all abundance emerges is, by its nature, infinite. Someone else's thriving business is not evidence that the market is crowded. It is evidence that the market is alive. Someone else's creative success is not evidence that there is no room for yours. It is evidence that the field is generative and responsive. When you can genuinely feel that, when you can witness another person's abundance and feel something that is not envy but actual, authentic celebration, you have crossed from the competitive plane to the creative one. And that crossing changes everything. The creative mind sees only the abundance of the universe. It never competes. It creates. And in creating, it adds to the sum total of wealth in the world rather than redistributing existing wealth. This is the economic and spiritual distinction that matters most. The competitive mind redistributes. The creative mind generates. The competitive mind fights over the pie. The creative mind bakes new ones. Now, how do you move from one to the other? This transition is not achieved through willpower alone. You cannot simply decide to stop being competitive and immediately become creative. The competitive mind has deep roots. It was installed by family systems, by educational cultures, by economic environments that genuinely did feel scarce and threatening. You cannot shame yourself out of it. You cannot intellectually argue yourself out of it. You need to replace it, to deliberately cultivate the inner experience of abundance until it becomes your dominant frequency. Practice 1. Train yourself to see infinity everywhere. Nature is the most reliable teacher of abundance. A single fig tree can produce thousands of figs in a season. An ocean contains more water than any individual could drink in 10,000 lifetimes. The night sky contains more stars than all the words ever spoken by every human being who has ever lived. When you genuinely absorb the sheer, almost obscene generosity of the natural world, the idea of a limited universe begins to seem not just incorrect, but absurd. Every time you feel the competitive constriction, the tightening of the chest, the narrowing of vision that comes from scarcity thinking, deliberately redirect your attention to evidence of infinity. Find the ocean, find the night sky, find a forest in spring, riotous with growth, asking no one's permission. Let the scale of natural abundance recalibrate your inner set point. Practice 2. Actively celebrate other people's abundance. When you hear that someone you know has achieved something significant, financial, creative, or personal, see if you can generate a genuine feeling of celebration. Not performed, not gritted teeth forced, but real. It will not always come easily. The competitive programming runs deep. But every time you manage it, every time you feel authentic joy at another person's flourishing, you send a clear message to the field. I believe in abundance. I recognize that their success is not my loss. And that message, delivered not as words but as a genuine felt state, begins slowly and then rapidly to change what the field reflects back to you. Practice 3. Stop competing and start creating. In your work, in your business, in your career, whenever you catch yourself asking, how do I beat them? Redirect immediately to, what can I build that doesn't yet exist? Stop tracking competitors and start tracking your own creative vision. Stop asking what's winning in the market and start asking what the market is missing that you might uniquely provide. The people who create genuinely new value, who bring something original, something that serves a real human need, consistently outperform those who are simply fighting for position in an existing market. Innovation does not compete. It renders competition irrelevant by defining an entirely new category. Practice 4. Live and speak in the language of increase. In every interaction, in every environment, ask yourself, how can I leave this person, this place, this situation slightly richer than I found it? not just financially, richer in energy, in insight, in clarity, in encouragement, in genuine care. When you become a source of increase for others, you align yourself with the universe's own creative directive, and what you give in increase returns to you multiplied. The creative person never worries about competition because they know that no one else can play their role. The universe has a place and a purpose for you that is uniquely yours. When you occupy it fully, competition becomes not just irrelevant, but invisible. There is a picture I want you to hold in your mind as we move toward Part 4. Imagine two people standing at the edge of an ocean. The first person is standing with his hands cupped, trying desperately to gather as much water as possible before someone else takes it, watching nervously over his shoulder, hoarding what he has caught. The water, trapped in his palms, grows still and stagnant. The second person stands with her arms open. She is not grasping, she is not competing. She is simply present, open, receptive, aligned. The waves come to her naturally. They wash through her and recede and return. She holds none of it. She grasps for none of it. And yet she is never, ever without water. This is the difference between the competitive mind and the creative mind. One grasps and depletes. One opens and overflows. The ocean is the universe's abundance. It is not running out. It was never running out. The only question was always whether you were standing with cupped hands or open arms. Open them. Vision, belief, and gratitude, the three pillars of effortless wealth. Everything around you right now. The device in your hands, the room you occupy, the building that houses it, the roads leading toward it, the systems that deliver electricity and water to its walls. Every single piece of physical reality you can perceive began as something invisible. Before the room was built, there was a blueprint. Before the blueprint was drawn, there was a vision in someone's mind. Before the vision crystallized, there was a desire, a possibility, an imagined future that did not yet exist anywhere except in the fertile space of human consciousness. This is not poetic language, it is the literal sequence of creation. Nothing physical has ever come into being without first passing through the gateway of mental reality. The chair you are sitting on was a thought before it was wood. The words you are reading were an intention before they were language. Every human-made thing in the visible world is a materialized thought, a piece of mental reality that found its way, through the medium of consciousness, desire, and directed action, into the physical dimension. You must form a clear and definite mental image of what you want. You must hold this image in your thoughts with the fixed purpose to get what you want and the unwavering faith that you will get it. No thought of form can be impressed upon thinking substance without the form being created. These are not instructions for daydreaming, they are engineering specifications. The universe, that intelligent, responsive, creative field, is essentially a vast fabrication facility waiting for instructions. It is perpetually ready to build. It has infinite resources, infinite creativity, infinite capacity. But it cannot build without a design. A contractor, however skilled and well-equipped, cannot construct a building without a blueprint. The universe is similarly helpless without specificity. This is why so many people who sincerely want financial abundance never experience it. Their mental images are vague, shifting, and contaminated by fear. They want more money, but their dominant mental image is of bills they cannot pay. They want freedom, but their most frequently visited mental picture is of the cage they are currently inhabiting. They say they believe in abundance, while their attention is riveted to evidence of scarcity. Think of the mind as a projector. Whatever image you consistently load into it, the external world becomes the screen upon which that image is displayed. The world is not creating your experience independently and imposing it on you. The world is faithfully, mechanically projecting back to you the predominant images in your mental projector. If you load images of anxiety and shortage, the screen shows anxiety and shortage, regardless of how loudly and frequently you announce that you want something different. Affirmations spoken over a mental background noise of terror do almost nothing. The field does not listen to your words. It responds to your feeling. Tone. The actual lived emotional atmosphere of your inner world, moment to moment. This brings us to the 3 pillars. Not 3 separate practices, but 3 interlocking components of a single coherent way of being. Together, they constitute what Wattles might have called the complete formula for effortless wealth. The first pillar, vision. Vision is not hope. Vision is not wishing. Vision is the deliberate, disciplined practice of holding a specific, emotionally charged, vividly detailed image of your desired reality, and holding it so consistently, so steadily, that the field has no choice but to organize itself around it. The specificity matters enormously. I want financial security is not a vision, it is a vague desire. And the field cannot build from vague desires any more than a contractor can build from a verbal description of a nice place to live. You need the blueprint, the dimensions, the materials, the finish. What does your financially free life actually look like? Not in broad strokes, in precise detail. Where are you? What does the air smell like around you? What does the space feel like under your feet? What are you doing with your time? Who is with you? What does your body feel like in that version of your life? Your shoulders, your chest, the quality of your breath. Detail is not indulgence. Detail is technical precision. The more specific your mental image, the more precise the instructions you are feeding into the creative field. Give it an extraordinary blueprint, and hold that blueprint not with anxious, white-knuckled intensity, but with relaxed, confident knowing. There is a crucial difference between the grip of desperate wanting and the ease of settled expectation. The desperate grip broadcasts, "I do not have this, and I am terrified I might not get it." The settled expectation broadcasts, "This is already mine. I am simply watching it arrive through the physical dimension." The second pillar, belief. If vision is the blueprint, belief is the material from which the structure is actually built. Modern people have largely been conditioned to believe only in what they can already see, touch, and measure. We are empiricists by cultural programming, trained to accept only what is already visible as evidence of what is real. But this approach fundamentally misunderstands the creative sequence. In the sequence of creation, invisibility precedes visibility. The unseen precedes the seen. And to engage fully with the creative law, you must be capable of being certain about something before it has materialized. This is what Wattles called faith, not religious faith in any doctrinal sense, but a specific, functional, practical faculty, the ability to know the outcome before the evidence arrives, to feel the certainty of the result before the result is visible. He distinguished sharply between hope and faith. Hope, he wrote, is passive. It says, "Maybe, perhaps, I wonder if, please let it happen." Hope keeps the desired outcome at arm's length. It maintains a careful psychological distance, a distance that preserves you from disappointment, but also prevents you from generating the frequency of certainty that actually attracts the outcome. Belief, true, felt, embodied belief, says, "It is done. I do not know the exact route by which it will arrive, but I know it is coming, the way I know the sun will rise tomorrow. I am not waiting to see if it will happen. I am watching how it happens." That shift from if to how is not semantic, it is fundamental. The practical application of this pillar has 4 components. First, speak in the completed tense. Rather than "I will be financially free," practice saying and feeling "I am financially free." The abundance is flowing, the channels are open. Second, feel it first. Every day, take time to enter the emotional reality of your vision before the physical evidence of it exists. Third, disengage from the appearance. When your bank account tells a story that contradicts your vision, do not let that story become your dominant mental reality. Fourth, act from abundance, not toward it. The third pillar, gratitude. Of all the teachings in Wattles' work, his emphasis on gratitude is simultaneously the most overlooked and the most mechanically powerful. It is easy to dismiss gratitude as a feel-good spiritual practice, something you do when things are going well. But Wattles saw it as something far more technical. Gratitude is the frequency that maintains your connection to the infinite source. The grateful mind is constantly fixed upon the best. Therefore, it tends to become the best. It takes the form of the best and will receive the best. When you are genuinely grateful, not as a performance, not as a guilt-driven religious obligation, but as a real, heartfelt acknowledgement of the abundance already present in and around your life, you broadcast a specific signal. That signal says, "I recognize what I have. I am in relationship with the source of supply. I am not in opposition to the flow. I am participating in it." This is why people who practice genuine gratitude, not lip-service gratitude, but deep, regular, felt gratitude, consistently report that their financial circumstances improve in ways that seem disproportionate to any change in their external actions. The gratitude itself is a mechanism. It opens the channel through which supply flows. Conversely, every complaint, every expression of resentment, every habitual focus on what is wrong, what is missing, what is inadequate. These are signals that say, "I am in opposition to what is," and the field cannot pour abundance into a consciousness that is continuously broadcasting opposition. Begin each day before you rise with specific, felt gratitude. End each day with specific, felt gratitude. Not for what you wish you had, for what you genuinely actually have. The capacity to breathe, to think, to see, to learn, to choose. For the abundance already present that you may have been taking for granted. And then extend that gratitude forward to the abundance that is on its way, that is even now organizing itself to reach you, that is approaching through channels you may not yet be able to see. This is what Wattles called receiving things in their coming, the faith to be grateful for what is not yet visible, the trust to say thank you before the delivery arrives. This is not magical thinking. It is the most technically precise spiritual practice described in his entire body of work. Together, vision, belief, and gratitude, these 3 pillars form the complete architecture of the inner world from which effortless wealth naturally and inevitably flows, not as a miracle, not as an accident, as a law. The effortless supply, living as the law. There comes a moment in every genuine transformation when the understanding moves, not when it enters the mind. That can happen in an instant, through a book, a conversation, an insight that arrives unbidden in the early hours of the morning. But when it moves from the mind down into the body, into the breath, into the way you stand at a window looking out at the world, into the quality of the silence you carry between conversations. That movement, from intellectual knowledge to embodied knowing, is the moment the law begins to work for you rather than through you unconsciously. Everything we have covered so far has been preparation for this moment, the dismantling of the labor myth, the exposure of the competitive mind, the construction of vision, belief, and gratitude. These are the groundwork, but the building itself, the actual lived experience of what Wattles called the advancing life, of what we might call effortless supply, is what we will explore now. And we will begin with the one instruction that frightens people most: act. Wattles was not teaching passive mysticism. He was very clear. You must act now upon the people and conditions in your present environment. You can act in a present environment only, not the environment you hope to inhabit in the future, not the environment you wish you inhabited in the past. You must act in the environment you are in. This instruction is both demanding and liberating. Demanding because it eliminates the comfortable fantasy of waiting for the right conditions before beginning. Liberating because it means that regardless of where you are starting from, regardless of how limited your resources, how restricted your circumstances, how humble your beginnings, you can begin right now to act from alignment. What does it mean, practically, to act in a certain way? To act from the creative plane rather than the competitive one? It means this: every action you take, however small, is an expression of your innermost belief about yourself and the universe. When you send a message from a place of desperate fear, you can hear it in the words, feel it in the tone. It carries that frequency into the world, and the world responds to the frequency, not the words. When you make a phone call from a place of genuine confidence, of settled expectation that good things are in motion, the person on the other end feels something they cannot fully name, and they respond to it. The quality of your action matters infinitely more than the quantity. One action taken from a completely aligned, completely confident, completely generous inner state can achieve what 100 actions taken from anxiety and desperation cannot. This is not metaphor. This is the consistent observation of every serious student of the creative law throughout history. There is a beautiful passage in Wattles where he describes the way a great artist approaches their work. They do not frantically produce. They are not in a race with time or with other artists. They bring their full, unhurried attention to the piece in front of them. They pour their complete presence into each stroke, each note, each word. And from that quality of presence, something emerges that transcends the mere technical execution. Something that carries the signature of genuine creative intelligence, something that moves and changes other people. This is available to you in every domain of your life. The business proposal written from that quality of presence carries it. The client meeting conducted from that place of inner steadiness creates it. The financial decision made from settled confidence rather than anxious desperation generates it. Now let us talk about supply. Specifically, about what happens when you align in the way we have described. Wattles described a state he called creative plane living, a mode of existence in which abundance flows not from your effort but through it, not as the reward for your sacrifice but as the natural byproduct of your alignment. In this state, money is not something you chase. It is something that follows you. It follows you the way your shadow follows your body. Not because you are pulling it, not because you are earning it in the conventional sense, but because of what you are. Think of the difference between a dam and a river. A dam holds water. It hoards it. It builds walls against the flow, creates enormous pressure, and expends enormous energy simply maintaining the containment. Eventually, the pressure becomes too great, or the structure weakens, and the dam fails catastrophically. A river does not hold. It moves. It channels. It accepts from the source above and delivers to the sea below. It does not accumulate. It circulates. And because it circulates, the source keeps flowing. Fresh water arrives continuously. The river is never empty because it is never hoarding. Your relationship with money is meant to be a river, not a dam. The paradox of conscious wealth, and it is a genuine paradox, observable in the lives of the most consistently abundant people, is that the more freely you circulate what you receive, the more continuously it arrives. The more you trust the source to replenish, the more generously it does. The less you hoard, the more you have. The more you give from abundance consciousness, the more abundantly the field provides. This is the law of increase. Wattles described it as the fundamental operating principle of the creative universe. The universe is not static. It is inherently expansive, inherently generative, inherently oriented toward more life, more expression, more abundance. When you align with that expansion, when you become an instrument of increase rather than an obstacle to it, you are swimming with the current of creation itself. And the current is very, very powerful. Now here is a question that cuts close to the bone. What is your actual relationship with money? When a payment arrives, when your salary clears, when a client pays an invoice, when an unexpected sum appears in your account, what do you feel? Is there a moment of genuine ease, of something that might be called relief or gratitude or simple satisfaction? Or does the arrival of money immediately trigger the anxiety of its potential loss? If that secondary anxiety is familiar to you, then you are, without meaning to, in a constant state of financial opposition. You are saying to the universe, simultaneously, "Send me more money," and, "Oh no, what if I lose what I have?" These two signals cancel each other out. They create the financial equivalent of standing with one foot on the accelerator and one foot on the brake. The shift required is not to stop caring about money or to become recklessly indifferent to financial reality. The shift is to change the emotional relationship from opposition to partnership. And once you truly internalize it, once you feel it in your bones rather than just understand it with your mind, you stop being the anxious pursuer of financial security and become something radically different. A conscious channel for abundance. Someone who does not grasp for money, but through whom money, and everything money represents, flows freely and naturally. The final teaching of this journey brings us back to the beginning, to that old, deep, pervasive myth that your worth is measured in your suffering, that abundance must be fought for, that the universe is indifferent or even adversarial to your prosperity. Let that myth go. Not with resentment for all the years it may have cost you, but with the simple, clean relief of someone setting down a heavy pack they have been carrying for far too long. The universe is not your adversary. It is your collaborator. It is not rationing abundance. It is perpetually generating it. It is not waiting for you to prove yourself through sacrifice. It is waiting, with extraordinary patience, with genuine eagerness, for you to simply open to what has always been available. You are not a beggar at the gate of prosperity. You are the gate itself. You are the channel, the instrument, the living aperture through which the universe's infinite creative intelligence seeks to express itself in material form. That expression, when you are aligned, when you are clear, when you are operating from vision and belief and genuine gratitude, is effortless, not because it requires no action, but because the action flows from a completely different source than struggle. It flows from joy, from inspiration, from the deep cellular satisfaction of being exactly what you were made to be, a creative, conscious, generous human being through whom the law of abundance operates as naturally and inevitably as light moves through a clean pane of glass. Wattles's closing vision was for a world in which every human being had discovered this truth. World in which people had stopped fighting over the crumbs of a perceived scarcity and had begun creating from the infinite table of a genuine abundance. a world in which the wealth of one genuinely contributes to the wealth of all, because the source from which all wealth flows is not finite but infinite, not competitive but creative, not struggling but simply, continuously, abundantly alive. That world begins with a choice, your choice, made not once in a dramatic moment of decision, but every morning when you open your eyes. Every moment when the old fear rises and you remember, gently but firmly, what you now know to be true. You are not here to scrape and struggle and survive. You are here to create, to expand, to contribute, and to thrive. And in the thriving, in the full, joyful, conscious expression of everything you contain, you become, for everyone whose life touches yours, a living proof of the law. Never broke, not because of what you have accumulated, but because of what you have become. And what you have become cannot be taken, cannot be lost in a market crash, cannot be threatened by an economic recession, cannot be diminished by any external circumstance whatsoever. You have become conscious. You have become aligned. You have become, in the deepest and most enduring sense of the word, wealthy. The river flows, the source gives, and you, finally, gratefully, joyfully, receive.